Hello, everyone. My name is Gina Arenas. I am a program manager at Microsoft, and I'm in charge of the Microsoft Graph and Excel extensibility. Today, I'm going to talk about Excel and how you extend Excel to fit your business needs. So I'm going to cover 3 points and then let you go with the set of resources that you can use to get started. First one, I'm going to do a brief overview of the Excel extensibility and what has happened over the last 30 years of the product and where we are today. Then I'm going to talk about Excel Workbook as a service. This is something that is brand new. We actually released it a month ago. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time in this section, this part of my talk on this. And I'm going to talk also briefly about Excel add-ins. And for those of you who are not familiar with Office add-ins, there's a talk at noon that is going to cover that in much depth. And like I said before, after that, I'm going to give you a set of resources that you can use to get started. OK. So when we think about Office as a platform, and this is just to frame it in context with Office in general, we think about 3 pillars. The first one is building rich user experiences within the Office products. So this is within Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, Outlook, OneNote, Project, and all of the others. Like, how do you extend that user experience that in a way that you can put your functionality there and it participates in the Office UI as if it were part of Office. The second one is a set of web and device applications that you can build using the data that is within the Office services to power your application. So here is you're using APIs to access SharePoint and Exchange data or data in Azure Active Directory. And you use that on data and other services to build smart contextual applications. And the third one is how do we participate within video, in conversations, and connectors. And this whole thing that we've been talking about, conversations as a platform, and how Office is really positioned in a way that we can, you can build great applications with Skype, with Outlook conversations, and much more products. So in terms of Excel extensibility, Excel has evolved. I mean, it's a 30-year-old product, right? In the early 90s, and since Excel began, we understood that on its own it was not going to get up the pickup that we wanted to, and that we needed to enable developers to extend Excel with their own functionality. Earlier technologies like XLM, the C API, or XLL enabled some extensibility on the first versions of Excel. Towards the end of the mid-90s, we enabled VBA and the COM add-ins that started to enable some automation scenarios. As the technologies evolved and it stopped being from something that you run on your own desktop, and we got servers involved in the mix like SharePoint, the technologies evolved as well on the extensibility front, where we started the coming up of the .NET framework, exposing interop between COM and VBA, and enabling the VBA BSTO add-ins, the Visual Studio tools, that enable you to build integrations with Excel using .NET. And then also a set of APIs exposed on the server, SOAP and REST APIs, that enabled integration with the data that was within the files. Now, that works well when you have a file sitting in your server and all of the users just interact with it through a desktop. But as we move towards a mobile-first, cloud-first world, where Excel is running on your Mac, Excel is running on the on the web, Excel is running on iPad, that no longer works. That collaboration that comes into the mix when we are driven by a mobility of the users, then we have to rethink how we extend Excel. So in 2013, we introduced a JavaScript API that allows developers to interact with the Excel construct. And this, actually, the first version of this API was symmetric across Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So you could, it's called office.js, and you could use that to interact with data, get set data from the workbook, and do basically the same thing across the clients. Now that's good, but we have per workload functionality that was not exposed in this common API. So we invested over the last couple of years on having a rich API that enables you to integrate with the Excel-specific objects. So I can interact with a worksheet, with a workbook, with tables, with ranges, charts, and much more. And in addition to that, we've exposed that API also in REST. So that's where I'm going to focus my talk during this hour that we're going to share, and look in depth onto like what are the opportunities for extending Excel with the REST APIs and with the JavaScript APIs. If we think a little bit about the type of business applications that are being built on top of Excel, there's kind of two big buckets: reporting and analytics. And there's a ton of different scenarios: reporting on sales, on marketing, on expense accounts, of management, BI, batch reporting, data manipulation, and analytics. You have budgeting, forecasting, data analysis. But at the end of the day, all of that functionality is to empower the information worker productivity. And information workers are no longer sitting on a desk. They are on the go, and they want to have the data right at their fingertips. So in order to meet that need, Excel extensibility is going into a cloud world with a cloud-ready, modern, and powerful framework that allows you to build two different sets of applications. And when I mean two different sets of applications, I don't mean that they are separate from each other. So you can build Excel-powered apps. So this is a web application that is running in the stack of your choice that interacts with Excel through a REST API. And Excel web add-ins, which are the rich user integration within the Excel experience. And this can be running on the desktop, can be running on the WAC, can be running on the Mac, and on the iPad, and soon onto iOS and phone and Android. But web add-ins can also call service APIs. Some of the benefits that we have is that it's multi-platform. You write your code once, and it executes wherever Excel runs. And the second one, which I think it's a huge improvement to what we had before, is the distribution model. So before, when you were, so how many are Excel developers writing VBA code? OK. So when you create, when you write VBA code and you have an MSI that you have to distribute, basically, you push it out to the services, to the users, and each of them individually run them on their desktop. And the day that you find a bug, you have to go and track down whoever has that particular code to roll it back and fix it. But if we have a centralized model where everything is running on your web server, then whenever you make a bug fix, it just rolls out into all of your users. Now, I mentioned we have these two API surfaces, JavaScript and REST. These are some of the objects that are exposed to it. So workbook, worksheet, named items, range, table, chart, formats, filter, sort, functions, and so forth. There's around 700 APIs that we have right now. And there's a lot of coverage into what was possible and is possible with VBA. So in that sense, VBA, which is actually currently the most used extensibility model for Excel, continues to be there. The thing is that it will fit some scenarios, not everyone, not all the scenarios. We continue to build our OM on top of it. but we're not actively making investments in sense of porting it to other platforms. So you're not going to see BBA code running on iOS or running on the WAC. We also have no plans to integrate it with Visual Studio. And like I mentioned before, and the focus of this talk is we are focusing on exposing JavaScript and REST-based APIs for cross-platform programmability. OK. So let's look at a demo of these things in action. So bots are pretty hyped these days. And I don't know if you've been trying the Ignite bot. Did you guys try the Ignite bot? Right? No? Come on. It's really easy. So what I have here, Skype. I'm not going to talk about the Ignite bot. You should just check it out after you leave the talk. But I have a yet better bot, which is the Excel bot. I'm not adding a contact. I'm adding a bot. Oh, wait. Here's my bot. So for now, I'm just going to say hi to my bot. And I'm going to, for a minute, saying hi to me, jump to this other other machine that I have right here. And I'm going to show you a workbook that I have on my desktop that is stored on my OneDrive for Business that has, so imagine I'm a startup that's selling clothing, and I have the sales over a year across the country. I have an online business. And this workbook, basically, I just use it to track my sales and growth, to track my product history, to get sentiment, to get my Twitter comments and use tools to analyze the sentiment on that. I use the same, based on my sales and the projections that I have, I use Excel to calculate a forecast on my sales, and I have sales by region. So one of the things that I can do with this file is I have here a set of comments from Twitter that talk about my product. I'm going to analyze them with Azure Machine Learning and the cognitive services by using an add-in. The add-in that I'm going to use is out of the machine learning team. And when I add this add-in to my workbook, what it's going to do is going to grab data from the file using that JavaScript API that I was mentioning before, and then analyzing the sentiment on the comments. So I can type my input right here. It's going to be this column. Let's see. The input is going to be this column. It's going to be from 1, 1, 2, 6, and 7. And the output is going to be right here, which is F1. Let's see. So basically what this is going to do is going to take that information from Excel and then take it to the machine learning service, do sentiment analysis on that data, and come back with whether that's a positive or negative sentiment. And then can I refresh my chart and see all of that sentiment analysis being shown right here in my chart. Then I can use that data to do forecast. So I'm here on September 2016, and I think my sales for this month are going to be $82,000. And I have my forecast projections for the rest of the next couple of years. Now, if I'm on the go, and this is where I come back to the Excel bot. So imagine I'm on the go, and my boss just called me and said, we closed the deal, And our September sales are going to go up by 40,000. I don't have my Excel file to update it right there, but I have my Excel bot. So what I have on the left-hand side is that same file sitting in OneDrive for Business. And on the right-hand side, I have the bot. And I'm going to tell the bot, open sales plan. This is the file that is sitting in my OneDrive. The bot is now going to make a REST request to that file to get that data. Show projections. Projections is a named item on my file, which is that chart that has all of the projections from my workbook, my sales. Look up September 2016 in forecast. Now the bot went to the Excel file and got the data for September 2016. And it's telling me your plan is 84,000. And there's the upper and lower confidence boundaries because I'm doing a forecast. Update plan to 120,000. Now, if I take into account those 40,000 up that my boss told me we're going to sell more, so the plan is now 120,000. Let's check that data. Look up September 2016 in forecast. For those of you who noticed, the Excel chart was updated right there. You see? The plan is now 120,000, and my chart reflects that update. Show projections. There you go. Just like that, I was able to interact with the content of my Excel file and using the Excel REST APIs. What do you think about it? Pretty cool, huh? OK. So what happened there is I have an Excel file sitting on my OneDrive with all of this data. I did sentiment analysis using the machine learning and cognitive services of adding for Excel. I used Excel functions to calculate the forecast based on the data. And then I used the Excel bot to access and update the data on the go. And remember when I mentioned that there's these two ways of extending Excel? Rich integrations within the client. The Azure Machine Learning add-in is an example of that. Excel, power your applications with Excel as a service. The Excel bot is the example of that. OK, so now I'm going to dive into Excel-powered apps. And we're going to look at what is behind that app we just talked about. So the first thing is the Excel REST APIs. We have over 700 APIs. They're available in the Microsoft Graph. How many of you are aware of what Microsoft Graph is? OK, so the API is available in the Microsoft Graph. It supports Excel files sitting in OneDrive for Business, Office 365 groups, and SharePoint Online. So any site, any library, document library that has an Excel file. As any other API in Microsoft Graph, is accessed and secured by Auth 2.0, and it uses plain JSON format for both input and output. So for those of you who are not familiar about the Microsoft Graph, it's a unified endpoint for accessing data across Office 365 and Microsoft Cloud services. And it's exposed under graph.microsoft.com. And you can access mail, calendar, contacts, messages, files from OneDrive, SharePoint, and groups. And within those files, you can address, for the ones that are Excel files, the Excel REST API. So how does it look? To get a workbook, basically you make a GET request on graph.microsoft.com, then it's the version, then is the path to that file in OneDrive, SharePoint, or the group. In this case, I'm using my OneDrive, and I'm addressing the drive and the items, and then the item by ID. And from there, once that I'm getting into that file, I go to the workbook endpoint and start interacting with Excel API. So let's look at some samples. I can make a REST request to do formatting on data on my workbook with a simple patch on a given range. And in this case, I'm just filling out with, I think that's the green color. And it's a very simple REST request with a body passing in that JSON for the description. Second example that I have here is creating a column cluster chart based on a set of data. So I have a range, A1 to C6, and I create a chart just calling /charts/add. Notice that I'm addressing the workbook, then I'm addressing the worksheets, then charts, and adding that chart. I can pass in what type of chart it is, the source data, and whether I want it to have an auto series or not. I can create, like you saw in the Excel bot, I can create an image based on charts and you get just the image out of it. There's other set of sample queries that I have here. For example, to doing data calculation. All of the functions, more than 300 functions in Excel, are available. And here is a really good value proposition for you when you're developing code. Say you work for some statistical firm or some financial firm, and you want to do a regression or a, I don't know, statistical model, Poisson distribution, or something like that. Well, Excel has all of them as built-in functions, right? Instead of rewriting that code, you can just use all of those Excel functions calling the Excel REST API. In this example that I have right here, I'm using the PMT function, which is calculating a payment. I pass in the variables, and I get back the calculation. I can sort data. So if I have a range given by an address, I can apply a sorting. And I can filter data as well. So for example, I'm filtering here by the top % on that given range. Let's see those queries in action. Just here. Okay. So what I have on the left-hand side is my OneDrive showing all of the files that I have in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to interact with this file that is called book.xlx. And on the right-hand side, I have the Graph Explorer, which is a web application that is built to show you requests from the Microsoft Graph. So you can make any type of request and get back the response inline. I'm logged in with my account, in this case with my demo account. And I'm going to start by just making a request to the me endpoint, which is going to bring me my profile. And if from there I navigate to the drive, and the root of my drive, it's going to bring me back all of the different children. It's going to bring me back all of the different files that I have sitting in my OneDrive. From here, I could go and find out what is the ID of that particular workbook and start then interacting with the Excel REST API. Alternatively, what I can do is address the file by name. So I can just come here to the root and say colon. Colon basically is a syntax that tells the Microsoft Graph that what comes there after the column is not a path-based REST navigation, but is actually a name a path to and a name to a file. So I can do :/book, because that's the name of my file, Excel SX, that colon again, because that's where my path and file of the name ends. And I can address, well, if I just do this, what I get back is the metadata of that particular file. And if I then say workbook, then I'm working with the Excel REST API. From there, it's just going to tell me, OK, you have a workbook. And I can go and say worksheets. And what is going to bring me back is you have one sheet in that workbook. Let's open it up and take a look. So here it is. I have one sheet in that workbook. And I already have a set of data in it. So let's do some of the Excel REST APIs that we were just, examples that we were just seeing in this slide. The first thing that I can do is get a range. So, oh, great. I'm going to type that. Here, I have exactly the same query. I'm in workbook. And what I'm going to do is get the sheet. So I go to workbook, worksheets. And then I'm going to go and get the range. Range is a function, and I pass in the address. So I'm saying, give me back what you have on between A1 and B9. When I make that query, what I'm going to get back is a JSON payload that tells me all of the different information that is contained within that range. And that includes the formulas, that includes the values, the formatting. All of that different information is part of that JSON. We looked at an example of adding a table. So same way, I can address the worksheet and then sheet 1, go to the tables collection, and then just invoke the add function. As a JSON payload, this is a post request. I'm going to pass in what is the address and whether or not if my table has headers. Once I make that request, it's going to execute it. And you're going to see the result fairly instantly. What is happening is that the REST API enters in a co-authoring session with Excel Online. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but if the Excel REST API and the workbook are in the same session, you will see the updates immediately. They can be in multiple sessions, so you can take about a couple of seconds to see the update. But there's a way into which you can create a session to make sure that all of the updates are reflected on the file right away. And I'll show that way. OK, so I've formatted this range as a table. And now let's go and add a chart to it. So I have here, I'm addressing, again, that particular sheet. And just by going to /charts/add and passing in a JSON payload that says what type of column I want, what is my source data, and what is the series, I can submit this request, and that chart is going to be created in my workbook. So what is happening here is I'm interacting remotely with this file that is sitting in OneDrive for Business, and I'm making REST requests against it and being able to get to all of this data. Now, we've gone through formatting as a table, creating a chart. Now let's update value. So for example, if I wanted to update B7 with currently is number 10, and just updating value to 22, it's a very simple REST request again. And I have a bad request. Where is the typo? I don't know what the typo is. I'm missing one worksheet. Resource not found. Sheets. Yes, I have. There's my typo. Sheet 1. No, it's sheet 1. Worksheets. Yeah. There you go. No, resource could not be found. Worksheet. Let's see this here. And don't even know what I'm typing. Sheet 1. This is not found worksheet. Let's just copy paste this page from here into here, and that should fix the problem. Whatever typo I had. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to move on from that one. I don't know where the typo is. And then I mentioned as well that we can use functions. So here I have an example of using the median function, which basically just takes, again, a range. I'm saying I'm going to get the median from B2 to B9. And what I get back from the request is the value of that calculation. So the median is 18.5. So it's a very simple example, but you can see how remotely you can interact with the content of the Excel file. You can not only read data, but you can create data. We formatted a table, created a chart, and all of these different things. And on top of that, use all of the functionality, the functions that are in Excel, which there's a pretty long list, that to power your business applications. So there's a whole bunch of different mathematical functions that are available as part of the API. OK. And I mentioned that the bot was built on top of this. So let's look at the bot and the APIs that it is making. So we have a little mode in the bot that it's verbose. And now when I make requests, the bot is basically going to tell me exactly the REST request that is making against the Microsoft Graph and the Excel REST API. Look up September 2016 in forecast. So this, again, is going to be making a GET request. And what you see right there is looking at the tables. So is addressing the file by the drive items and then the ID of the file. Then workbook, and is looking for the tables and a named item called forecast. And from there is going to the header row of the table and finding the data. So pretty simple how to make a REST request against a workbook sitting on Office 365 and getting access to that information. OK. So what happened there was we have the Excel bot, which can work on any platform. It's using the bot framework. And it's using the LUIS.ai, which is the language understanding framework for the bot, that takes the natural language query and calculates the intent of the user. As part of the workbook, as part of the Excel bot code, we have a set of workers that take that intention of the user and translate it into request for the Microsoft Graph. If you want to check out the code, aka.ms/Excel bot code has all of the code of the Excel bot. Now, I mentioned sessions. Using sessions, you can choose whether or not to save your changes within a workbook. In order to have a performant interaction with the workbook, we recommend that you create a session. And basically what you do is you make a post request to the create session function, and that returns session ID. Have it highlighted here what you get in the response. And the way that you use it is that every time that you make a request to the endpoint, you pass in the session ID as a header. This way, you're always interacting with the same session, and all of the changes are persisted within that particular session. Because the Excel REST API is part of the Microsoft Graph, then all of the Microsoft Graph SDKs support the Excel API. So if you don't like doing XML HTTP requests, because they're not super friendly when you have to do a ton, then you can use the .NET SDK if you're a .NET developer. We also have an Android SDK. Those two are already out there ready for production use. And we have in preview SDKs for Node and JavaScript, and coming soon other platforms. I have here a little example of how you would call the Excel API using .NET. Basically, you instantiate a client. You can address, if you look at the format of the code, you address the place where the file is. In this case, it's in the OneDrive. Then do workbook, worksheets, and in this case, I'm doing the same example of adding a column stack chart. OK, so what are the type of scenarios that you can achieve using Excel REST? First of all, data management. We have a partner today that is doing, it's called Zapier. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. But they do automation of workflows. You can build more workflows into kind of like a if this, then that scenario. And they've used Excel REST API to get data into Excel. So every time that I get a new lead on a customer, get the customer data into an Excel file. Or every time that I make a sell, or every time that I get a tweet on this particular tag, get that tweet into the Excel file. So I can do that data, automating data collection through the API in a very easy way without having someone to be doing back and forth between that data. Consuming data that is already in the Excel file, we saw that with the bot. Doing worksheet automation, using all of the functionality within Excel to power your application, like not having to rewrite all of those functions. And generating professional-looking charts, like all of the work and design work that we put into having really beautiful charts within Excel and being able to format them and being able to do all of that nice presentation. You can do it as well through the Excel REST API and then get images out of that you can embed in dashboards. And I'm going to just do a little partner showcase of one partner that we have been working with that has been integrating with Excel REST APIs. They are a SMB software provider. They're called Sage 50. They're from the UK. And actually, Satya participated in their summit back in the summer, showcasing our partnership with them. And basically, what they have is a suite of products that help small, medium business applications that don't have large enterprise software for doing things like HR, payroll, accounting, and things like that. And they do all that based on top of Office. And the one that I'm going to highlight is the Sage Intelligence that is powered by the Excel REST API. So basically what they have is their application has a bridge between data that is sitting on desktops and data in Office 365 and enables users to do financial reports like cash flow, forecast, profit, loss, balance sheets, and so forth. So this is one example of how partners have integrated with the API already. Now, that's part of Excel REST and how you can use the Excel REST APIs to power your applications. Now I'm going to cover the second part, which is Excel Web Add-ins. And this is how you can build rich applications within the Excel clients and that interact with the user. So first of all, this is not specific to Excel. You can build an add-in for any of the Office clients. And what it is just a web application that can be hosted in the platform of your choice, preferably on Azure, and an XML file that describes to Office where is that application sitting and how it interacts with the document. There's lots of benefits of doing these Office add-ins. I've mentioned before, you basically build it once and it runs wherever Office runs. And the second one is that you have that stream life cycle, where it is that you're deploying that to a corporate catalog, which basically means corporate deployment, which basically means that you can take one of these add-ins in Office 365 and say, I want my HR group to use this add-in, and do that configuration as part of the Office 365 admin portal, and only the HR group gets that add-in, and they don't have to do any installation within their client. And then again, like I mentioned before, like when you have any fix on that particular application, it's in your code base. You don't have to go and chase everyone that has the individual copies of the documents or of the workbooks to make those fixes. And then, because it's a web application, it can access any API, including the Office 365 APIs through the Microsoft Graph. So there are 4 types of extension, of user extension, that I want to highlight. The first one is a task pane adding, which, well, I'm just going to mention them here: task pane, content, adding, and dialog. And I have a few examples of how they look. Here's an example of the PayPal task pane add-in that interacts with the Excel document to create invoices. Here's an example of the Bing Maps content add-in, which basically it's a floating content window that interacts with a range within the workbook and maps it. And here are a couple of examples of the add-in commands. The add-in commands is actually relatively new functionality within the last 6 to 8 months. And that enables you to do several things. One is it has a teaching UI entry point, which is when users install your app, they tell you, you can put strings in there that say, hey, you've installed this app, here's how you get started. So it's not like so daring into like users don't know what's going on. The second one is that you can extend the ribbon, either by creating ribbon tabs or creating new ribbon tabs or extending existing ribbon tabs. And you can create single groups or single entry points. And the third one is contextual menus. So on the right-click menu, you can have an entry point in there that executes a function within your application. So the JavaScript APIs, also mentioned it a little bit before, which is basically a simple JavaScript library. You, on your web application, make a reference to the JavaScript library. We have 2 types. One is the common library, which works the same across Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. And the second one is app-specific. So there's an Excel-specific API, a Word-specific API, and because it's a library, supports IntelliSense, you can build TypeScript applications on top of it, and so forth. So in terms of the Excel APIs and the Excel-specific library, we have a requirements model, which basically is the way into which we increase the set of functionality that is enabled in the API. On REST, everything is on the given endpoint, because all of the changes on a version, all of the additive changes on a version don't change the version number of the API. So all of the things that are in the V1 endpoint of Microsoft Graph are the same things that are in 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3 on the JavaScript API. One of the cool things that I wanted to show about the APIs is how we are, just a second. How we are developing APIs right now. So it's not like we just come up with a set of ideas out of the black hat. No, we're community-driven. And actually, not only we're community-driven, listening to the feedback that developers in our community provide, but we are also putting our specs out there before we even invest engineering hours in them. So and all of them are open up in GitHub. So I have here the Office Dev repo and the Office-JS documentation. And you can see the master branch is what is live today. And we have another set of branches here that are marked as open spec. Open spec branches basically include new functionality that we're going to introduce into the APIs that you can provide feedback on. So for example, the 1.4 wave has all of the conditional formatting APIs. And you can read the documentation, and if there's anything wonky or any feedback that you want to provide about it, you can just provide it right here within GitHub. Okay. So this JavaScript library basically has a coding pattern that you create a function and you can batch a different set of instructions within that execution block. And because it supports batching, and you can also chain the set of promises. I have here an example of a JavaScript snippet that's creating getting the used range and changing the format on that particular range. So you see, when we were looking at the REST request, it's a very similar syntax, right? Like I'm doing workbook, worksheets. In this case, I'm not addressing the sheet by name. I'm just getting the active worksheet, getting the range, and changing the format. OK. So let's look at some demos of the Office.js API. Swipe to 7. The first thing that I want to show here, so I'm sitting on Excel. I have a little add-in that we've built, and we want to make available really soon. That is basically a snippet explorer. I can, with this snippet explorer, create new snippets. Maybe I can come here. And it already gives me the skeleton of the function. So it's just like adding your code right here. So let's say, for example, I'm going to create a worksheet. So you'll notice right away that I have full IntelliSense. And I can grab the context that has been already created and say .workbook. And I don't have to go back and forth within docs because IntelliSense allow me to just say, look at what is available. So I can just say worksheets and add sheet. So I'm going to add a sheet that is called Sheet 101. Right? And then I'm going to make it active. So I'm going to say .activate. And if I run my code, it's going to just basically create a new worksheet. So I have another set of snippets here that I wanted to show. The first one is set values on a range. And is that big enough? I think that we need to put it maybe a little bit bigger. Is this better? So again, here, what I have is a range. I'm taking the context, getting the active worksheet, and passing in the values of this range. When we run this particular piece of code, then basically it's going to add that range into the workbook. Now, similar to what we did in the REST sample, we can make this formatted as a table. I pass it in, like if we look at the code back, I pass in that it has context.workbook.tables.add, pass in the range, and then it formats this particular range as a table. It's actually, like, as you can see, very simple to interact with the API. Now I'm doing charts.add to add a column cluster. This is the same example that we saw on REST. And it executes and adds that particular chart. So that symmetry is actually pretty nice because you can go back and forth between what you're doing in REST and JavaScript. And finally, I have one that is taking all of these pieces together and is doing a little report generation. So this is not easy to see. I can make it bigger. So it's getting a range, adding values, doing some formatting, and adding a chart to it. So when I run it, it's very simple to just, with a few lines of code, get very nice reports or data formatting into Excel. OK, so now let me show you another demo within Visual Studio. Which is Woodgrove app. So this app, Visual Studio has full templates to create your add-ins. So just by going to File, New, Project, and doing an Excel add-in, you basically get all of the scaffolding for the project to create an add-in that adds a button to the ribbon and enables a task pane. I'm going to show a little bit of more than that on this particular sample, which is, imagine I'm trying to track all of my expenses, and this bank, Woodgrove, has provided this little add-in. So notice that once I run it, that extension on the teaching UI on the ribbon, where the new ribbon entry point was added, is shown. And maybe I can just go zoom this a little bit. And now this new ribbon has a set of entry points that will execute different things within the workbook. So the first one is just a welcome formatting the worksheet type of endpoint. Here I just changed the formatting of the workbook, of the worksheet. And then I can execute the second one, which is import transactions. Import transaction, basically what it's going to do is it's going to read all of the different transactions from, in this case, a JSON file, but it can be a web service that is bringing all of these transactions, and immediately creating a report on those transactions. If we look at the code, what it's doing is adding a worksheet and creating some formatting on that worksheet and adding the content based on the JSON file. So it's a very simple, you can see right here, it's a very simple operation to just add the data. Okay, if I go back to my Woodgrove command application, I'm going to now execute the create dashboards point. So this one is going to create a set of worksheets, and they're going to key off of this data and create a set of reports based on it. So I have a set of charts, expenses by category. So I created a table that it's just taking all of the categories, expenses by month. And here I'm using a set of functions that just adding functions to a cell that calculate the values. And I'm doing that all through code. So let's see that. Because right here, next entry point. So, oh, this is filter. Here. So basically, I'm on this particular table, I'm using Excel functions and adding those functions into the specific cells. OK, so that's a very simple demo on how you can build Excel add-ins that integrate with the, provide rich user experiences within Excel This woodrope application extends the ribbon, creates a new ribbon tab, has a whole bunch of different functionality on top of it. If you'd like to explore this sample more, it's available on GitHub under the Office Dev organization. And now let's continue with the presentation. Okay, so I'm actually running with a lot of time. As a recap, there's two ways to extend Excel that enable to take those applications that you build wherever Excel user uses Excel. The first one is Excel Power Apps, which are interacting with the Excel REST API that is exposed in Microsoft Graph. And the second one is building Excel web add-ins, which are embedded into the user experience within Excel. And as I showed on some of the examples, they're not independent of each other. You can create an add-in that interacts with service data. You can create an Excel-powered app that also has an add-in component. In terms of upcoming features, like I mentioned, we have the open spec. Here's I have the link to the 1.3 API that is currently on preview. Some of the things that we're working on right now are custom XML parts, document properties, conditional formatting, and eventing. And in terms of the REST side, today, Microsoft Graph supports both consumer and commercial accounts. So you can actually get data from accounts in Outlook.com and OneDrive. The Excel capability on OneDrive Consumer is not yet there, so it's something that we're working on enabling by the end of the year. I'm going to do another demo that it's a very, very common use case scenario that we've heard a lot from our customers, which is like, I'm going to close this one right here. I'm going to close this one as well. No, I was just going to say. And this demo is mail merge. So imagine for a second that I'm a teacher, and I have to send every single time every single time that kids are absent or late, or a report for the students, or that there's a meeting. I have to send a template to all the parents, and I have my list of students, and instead of me typing, copy-pasting every single email and every single parent's email and all of the things in there, I can just do a little application that does it for me. I have the data of the parents in Excel, and I can interact with my email using the Microsoft Graph. So what we have here is a set of mail templates. So we've created a set of mail. I created a set of mail templates on Outlook that have the format of the mail that we're going to send. So it's hello parent name, your child name has been absent for so many days, and signature, right? And if I run my code right here, we're going to see Excel starting a little application that is going to enable creation of these automated emails. So I have my task pane right here using the teaching UI that I'm adding mail merge. I'm going to launch this task pane. Because it's using the service APIs, it's going to ask me to sign in. So I'm going to sign in with the account. Wait. And it's going to go and read from the service the templates that I've had. So if you remember here, I have 3 templates: absence limit exceeded, parent-teacher conference, and progress report. These are the templates that I showcase here in my add-in. And I can select one of these templates. And what we're doing here is as part of the selection, just executed a little script that added some sample data, and I can preview the email that is going to be sent. And it's going to show you the preview message. Hello, Alex, your child has been absent. All of the different placeholders have been replaced. And send the email message. So it's going to take the list that is here sitting on Excel, and it's going to send to you. Heard a notification. It's going to send all of those different files, different emails. Now, the way that we do this is very simple. So we have here, I'm just going to stop this, a little TypeScript application that on the Excel side of the house is basically reading the data from Excel. Well, let me actually first talk about the Outlook part. On the Outlook part, is using the Microsoft Graph to read the folders. So basically now I'm going to get the templates, the folder that has the templates. So I find with the folder that has the templates and go and get the messages that are stored in that folder. Again, it's a request to the mail folders endpoint, passing in the folder ID, and then getting the messages. This function basically replaces the information from the messages and the table. And with this one, I send the emails. So it's a very simple TypeScript that allows me to just interact, read the messages from that particular folder, and execute the send request. On the Excel side, I have a piece that is creating that table. So here I have the values that I told you that we were adding. And then basically just getting that data, doing the merge with the email, and creating the text that is going to be sent. This code sample we're going to make available in GitHub, I think by the end of the week or next. And it's a sample of how you can use both sides of the house. Like remember, we talked about the Excel add-ins. I stopped it. The Excel add-ins plus the service APIs to get access to build rich applications. OK. So we talked about Excel extensibility overview. We talked about powering your Excel applications with Excel as a service using the Microsoft Graph and the Excel REST API endpoint. And we talked about building rich user experiences using Excel add-ins. Now, the one takeaway from today, dev.office.com/Excel, you'll find all of the information that you need there to get started, both on the REST APIs and the JavaScript APIs. You'll find link to code documentation, code samples, and if there's anything that you want there and you don't find me, tweet me, we'll add it. Thank you so much for your time. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. And of course, please provide feedback. OK, thank you. Any questions?
Do you think it will support the user-defined functions?
So the question is, will we support user-defined functions? We are working on it. The question is this working for Word exactly the same as it works for Excel? Yes, for the add-ins piece, so you can create rich user experiences within Word as well. We have a Word-specific JavaScript API. We don't have yet a Word REST API exposed through Microsoft Graph. It's in the roadmap. It's part of the roadmap. No, there's no date.
How does the JavaScript API compare to the Visto library? How rich is it compared to Visto?
if we compare it to VBA and VSTO, I mean, VBA is what. So if we compare the JavaScript against VBA, so what we've done is not a one-to-one mapping of APIs. What we've done is coverage of scenarios. And there are a set of things that are in VBA that you will not find in JavaScript. Let me give you an example. Sending email. You can do that with a Microsoft Graph. We're not going to expose that through REST because there's an easier way to do it. The form controls is one. You can, as part of the add-in framework, we have a dialog that you can use, and you can use any framework that you want to build a form on top of that, buttons or things like that. So because there is a replacement web technology, we're not exposing those APIs from VBA into JavaScript. Another example is system level access. This doesn't really play very well with cross-platform, right? Like if you want to access files within your desktop or things like that, you're running the application on an iPad. So those are some of the examples where that doesn't make sense to expose them in JavaScript, where our goal is to have this cross-plat framework and where there's already replacement on other technologies. But for the rest, yeah, it's there. So with the Graph API, multi-threading will be supported. It's through sessions, so you can create multiple sessions and interact with the workbook. It will be like will be more like a co-auth session with Excel. There can be multiple sessions opened within a workbook. Yes. So it's handled by co-auth. If at some point you're going to get, so if there's a conflict, you're going to get basically an error that says that the operation could not be executed.
So then you try again.
Exactly. Then you try again. Yeah. You had a question over here.
Yeah, my question was if it was down session and co-op issues and how you were talking about which co-op issues Excel is not today. And one of the examples where I think you're had is workbook crack open
Yep.
Excel Online.
Yes. So I was using Excel Online for the co-auth sessions, yes. We are working on co-auth for Excel Desktop. And so right now, if you have the file open in your desktop, it creates a lock on the file. If you have the file, you're interacting with the file on the WAC, then it just basically participates in the co-auth session. Yeah. And co-auth on desktop is coming. Yeah. So your question is? The multiple sessions look at a file of a unit, yes, as a unit of locking. You establish a session with the there is some level of parallelism between the sessions. So
how strong is that routine, rollback, deadlock, and all that stuff that needs to get in?
So, I mean, from the programmability perspective, the Excel REST API fully participates on co-auth as if it were another user. Does it make sense?
Right. But
So
yeah. So behind that, there needs to be
there's a huge amount of infrastructure and a huge amount of servers on top of Excel Web Access that do the brokering of all of the sessions and all of the different requests.
So we can go there.
Yes. Your question?
Does the REST API allow you to get the entire contents of a workbook, not just a range of the entire content?
So getting the entire content, you could download the file. You can download the file through the OneDrive API. So it's not on worksheet endpoint, but just the file, the content, and download the file.
If the user changes the workbook in memory or even in Excel Online, how can you make sure you get the current version and not the
version that's saved earlier?
So the question is, how can I make sure I get the current version? You know, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure.
Well, you have this like this.
Yeah, I mean, you will get whatever is the latest version on the server, and yeah, I think that's constantly changing through the co-auth session. So.
Well, is there an equivalent to the get file async method?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that available in the REST API as well?
I mean, it's just a REST request. So you go to the Drive endpoint, and you make an async request. You go to the Drive endpoint and do content, and then you download the values of the file. OK. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you.